Hello, I am Landis Lain. Pleased to meet everyone.
Thank you for Ms. Lain for being here. I'll go ahead and get us started. My name is Chris Wickman. I'm with the Ingham County Bar Association Board of Directors. I'll be hosting the event today for Ms. Lain, who is a candidate for office. I will let her introduce herself briefly. I'll start by talking about the ICBA. We're a voluntary organization of lawyers who provide educational and social events to various different our membership, which includes lawyers, paralegals, judicial secretaries, assistants, and other professions. We're not endorsing any particular candidate, but we're allowing all candidates an opportunity to participate in this deliberations, whether they are incumbent, challenged, or uncontested, and things like that. We're happy to have Ms. Lain here today. Without further ado, I will go ahead and turn it over to her. Thank you very much.
All right, so I suppose I am Landis Lain. I am running for Ingham County Circuit Court in the November election. I am currently an administrative law judge for the Michigan Office of Administrative Hearings and Rules. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to entertain them. I apologize for being a little late. I was just finishing up with work from the day job, so my apologies.
All right. Thank you for the brief introduction. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Lain? Remember, you can unmute yourself and ask them here, or you can message me in the chat and I can ask them of the candidate. Everyone is currently muted, so if you do want to ask a question, go ahead and unmute yourself. I'm not seeing any right now, so I'll ask a couple questions. What do you believe would be the biggest transition between your current position and the judge position if you were elected?
Well, because I'm an administrative law judge and our rules of evidence are somewhat fluid, I would have to really brush up on the rules of evidence because I understand in circuit court that they are much more strict. So, let's see. I have a question that says it will be helpful for Ms. Lain to give an overview of her background experience for the position. All right, so I have worked for the State Office of Administrative Hearings and Rules. We've changed names at various times, but for about 25 years, I have been an administrative law judge. I've been the director. I've also served as an assistant attorney general under Frank Kelly. I was a federal civil rights defense litigator for the Department of Corrections, and I also worked in the bond law area. Before that, I was an associate city attorney with the city of Lansing, and I did mostly district court work, some workers' compensation, but mostly litigation. Let's see, before that, I worked for UAW, General Motors Legal Services Plan, where I represented the UAW workers, and I also worked for the Michigan Department of Corrections as a hearing officer in the prison system, doing in-house prison misconduct hearings. I interned with the State Appellate Defender Office for 2 years, where I wrote briefs for convicted felons. So I have some extensive experience in both civil and criminal areas.
Thank you very much. And remember, if anyone has any questions, they can go ahead and unmute themselves, or you can private message me with regards to any questions. I'm not seeing any right now. Another question I'll ask is, do you have any ideas for the position, short-term, long-term, that you would hope to implement if elected?
My biggest issue is that people don't really feel that they can access the courts very easily. And I would like to see people being able to contact the courts to find out how they can navigate them more easily. I would like to see a lot less people going to jail for nonviolent crimes, and hopefully maybe I do know that is it Judge Donald Allen has a program for substance abusers where they go through sort of a diversion program and they continue in that program, and as long as they don't reoffend, that at the end that maybe they can get their records expunged. I would like to see a little bit more I guess, working with families, hopefully to keep them together, or at least coming up with other ways in which to help families help themselves. So I'm sorry, Carmen, you had Ms. Foy, you had a question and it went away. I don't see it.
Oh, she is muted.
You have to unmute your mic. Go down at the right and unmute your mic.
Carmen,
Okay.
you are,
There we go. There you are.
I'm good. Okay. I said it looks like you have a lot of various experience and you would bring a lot to the judgeship.
I think I would. I think I would probably be the ideal candidate because I do have such varied experience. Also, I've also taught at LCC. I've taught at the graduate level. I've taught writing. I've raised my own children, so I don't have anything that will keep me from the job. I didn't want to do anything earlier because I didn't want to do anything to impact my children. And I know that at circuit court level, there are, you're dealing with felons. A lot of times you're dealing with felons' families. You're dealing with people who are in crisis. So I didn't want that to be something that would impact my children. So that's why I decided to do this now instead of earlier.
We did have a question from the chat. I'm sorry, I did interrupt someone.
All right. Let's see.
The question from the chat is, what excites or worries Ms. Lain about filling a seat that is slotted to be a family division seat?
What excites
or worries you about filling a seat that is slotted to be a family division seat?
I think that when you are dealing with people's families, you have to be really careful. I worked in the prison system and I was working with, of course, convicted felons. And a lot of times, I would get death threats, things like that. And they would say, I'm going to call my sister to come kill you in the parking lot. So I know as a circuit court judge that you're going to get some of that. And so that would be the part that would worry me because we live in the community. The thing at working in the prison system, we didn't really live in the community, but I live in this community. So that would be a worry because that's always something. Also, when I did federal civil rights defense litigation, we got death threats. We had federal marshal protection sometimes, but I like to think that I am a person that's very approachable. I like to think that I'm a person that I can sit down and do some I like to talk to people, find out what their problems are, because sometimes people having their say is more important than having their way. And sometimes people just want to be heard. And I think that's really, really important. So I would say that would be something that would excite me, is allow people to be heard and to express themselves and to give me an understanding of how I can help them. Because I think that as a judge, it's important that if you can find ways to help people without being punitive, that helps the people, and it also helps them from having to come back to your court over and over and over again, if you can find a way to assist them.
You have another question in the chat. It says, Landis, do you have a preference for family court or criminal?
I do not. I have done both. I currently do some child abuse and neglect expunction hearings. So I also have done extensive criminal, so I don't really have a preference necessarily. I like to think that I could work better with the families just because it's not a criminal case, and so there may be more things that I could help the families do. And in a criminal case, it's are you guilty or are you not guilty, and then it's the sentence. What are you going to sentence this person to? With the families, there may be some other equitable remedies that I can come up with to help them to navigate and help themselves as a family. So I think that because I just answered that question, I probably prefer family court, but I can do either.
All right, thank you. Did anyone have any further questions for Ms. Lain? Remember, you can unmute yourself and ask right now, or go ahead and type it in the chat, either to myself privately or in the chat room, and we will go ahead and ask it.
And I also will say in answering that question, that I do the child abuse and neglect hearings, and sometimes because I am an administrative law judge, I'm limited in what I can do. I have to follow the law and the regulations and the policies of the Department of Health and Human Services, whereas a circuit court judge, I would have a little bit more leeway and hopefully could fashion some more equitable remedies. And a lot of times equitable remedies will help families sustain themselves.
Any further questions for Ms. Lain at this point?
Could I ask
Go ahead.
Yeah. How are you going to get up to speed on all the domestic relations law that goes on in the family division?
I will do extensive reading because I know that laws change with blinding speed. One of the ways that I'll keep up is exactly the way I keep up in the job that I currently have. We do benefit services, we do child protective services, we do retirement cases, we do all different cases. So we have policies and rules and regulations that we have to follow. And basically every time I do a case, I go in and I check the policy, because the policies change with blinding speed. So I know laws don't change quite as quickly. And the biggest thing that I think that I have is that I'm not afraid to ask questions. So I would prefer to, if I don't know something, I will go and ask another judge. That's the easiest thing to do. If I do some research and I don't come up with the answer myself, there's nothing stopping me from getting on the phone and saying, you know, Judge, can you help me here? Or I will, what we do a lot of times is we will give each other a scenario and say, okay, this is the scenario that I have, you know, and this is the decision that I think that I want to make. What do you think? And oftentimes we'll argue or talk it out until we can come to an understanding of what the rules and regulations actually say. Sometimes we have rules and regulations that are not, that we don't consider to be in compliance with the law, in which case we have to make a recommended decision, or just sometimes the laws or the rules are silent, in which case we have to make a decision. So I think that getting up to speed is just a matter of sitting down and reading and talking to people and sitting in and listening. You know, I think as lawyers, we're all competent to do research and writing, and I know I'm a really good researcher. I don't ever leave a stone unturned. If I think that there is something not quite right, or if something doesn't sit right with me, I'm always willing to do research. You know, of course, I watch the news regularly. I'm listening to the Supreme Court decisions coming down today. I've even pulled up a couple of them because I'm like, that doesn't make sense to me. Let me, you know, explain this to me. How does this make sense? So I keep up with I keep my finger on the pulse of what's going on in the legal field.
You talked earlier about, I guess, the concept of access to justice.
Yes.
Getting people into the system, and that's an area I'm very interested in. How are you going to handle cases where one or both parties does not have an attorney? Because a large percentage of the family court load, particularly in domestic relations, are people representing themselves on custody matters, child support matters, do-it-yourself divorces.
Right.
And so tell me how that's going to look in your courtroom.
Well, I have found that it is best to listen to people and hear what they have to say, because they will often tell you what they want. It's best to ask questions of them. And sometimes the biggest question that you ask of a person is, what is it that you would like me to do? And they will often tell you that. I am not a person that feels like I have to behave like I'm clairvoyant. And I will tell a person, you know, if this is not something that I can do for you, these are the things that I can do. And will any of this work to satisfy you? Now, there are many, many people who will never be satisfied, who will never be fed, and that's okay. So then ultimately, I will have to make the decision within the bounds of the law and within the bounds of my authority. Of course, anytime you have, let's say, a divorce, you have two people who absolutely want something, and they usually want something very different. You know, they're arguing over the dog. So you know, so at that point you have to make the decision that you think is fair within the rules and regulations and within the bounds of the law. You can't, you can't split the dog in half. I'm not Solomon, of course. And some people are so horrible, they would be like, yes, cut the dog in half. At that point, that you kind of lose your authority. So you just have to, as a judge, you have to make the decision, and you have to expect to be hated. With that said, I've raised children. I've raised several children. So I remember them telling me, Mom, your rules are oppressive. And I'm like, yes, well, when you get 25, you go on Oprah, you tell them, what a bad mom I was, but right now these are the rules. And so that, I think you take a lot of that into the courtroom with you. You take your life experience into the courtroom with you. I've been a teacher. So, I've had students tell me, you don't care about me when they didn't do their work. And I'm like, no, you don't care about yourself. So I am fully capable and able of telling people, these are the things that you need to do to make it so that your life will go the way it needs to go. And this is what I can do for you. This is the limits of what I can do for you as a judge. So I don't think I have all the answers, but I can give them strategies in which to go forward.
Thank you very much. We have another question from chat. COVID-19 has expanded the digital divide. How comfortable are you with technology, and how would you ensure all parties have access to the court system?
Well, I am getting more and more comfortable with technology. The Zoom call is something that has been new to us, and we've done mostly audio calls in the current job that we do. We're going to be getting trained on a different type of camera system. I don't believe it's Zoom, but they are considering bringing Zoom into our courtrooms also. The problem is that we have a lot of clients who are, or I should say, petitioners who are indigent and they don't have access to computers. So I would say I'm very comfortable with technology. I'm always willing to learn about more technology and practice with technology. In ensuring all parties have access to the court system, a lot of what I do right now is, even when I get a case and the person doesn't show up, I will look for a telephone number. I will call them on the line. I will say, did you get notice of this hearing? Sometimes they'll tell me I got notice of the hearing, but I didn't get the documents. I said, well, do you have access to, an email? And they say, yes, I have access to the email. I will forward them the documents so that they can follow along with what's going on, because everybody's entitled to due process. And one of the ways that you ensure due process is that you ensure that they have access to the appropriate documentation, that they can hear what's going on, that they have been apprised of what their rights are.
Thank you very much. Did anyone have any further questions for Ms. Lain at this point? Remember that you can either unmute yourself and ask them, or you can message in the chat or to me personally. I'm not seeing any for right now. Ms. Lain, did you have anything else to add?
I don't. Thank you so much for allowing me to come before you. I apologize again for being late. I was in the middle of, I was actually still working and didn't realize the time and didn't realize that it was July 9th because I'm at home. So, so I apologize, and I hope everybody has a great day. Thank you so much for allowing me to come forward.
All right, well, we very much appreciate your participation. Remember, we will go ahead and have this recorded. We will upload it on YouTube and share it with Ms. Lain as well as with the ICBA. Thank you, everyone, for your patience today and for being here. We very much appreciate it. Hello, Judge Ward. If anyone has any questions, feel free to contact Ms. Lain. You can stick around for a few minutes and socialize, but I will go ahead and stop the recording at this time. Thank you very much.
Have a great day.